Hi, this is our video recording for our reading class for today. We're going to talk about the concept of sequence. Sequence means the order of something. It's not just, doesn't just mean that in stories. It's a general vocabulary word, the sequence of events. The police asked the suspect about the sequence of events. What order did things happen in? So the sequence means the order in time of events that happen. So you could say, what were the sequence of events in the movie? What were the sequence of events after you left for school in the morning? What happened first? What happened second? What happened third? Now, there are different ways that writers use sequence in stories. The main sort of traditional way that sequence is used, the order of events is used, is called a chronological narrative structure. Narrative structure is the way that a writer of a story sets up the events in time in the story. Now, traditionally, storytellers used chronological time. Chronological means time order. What happened first in time? What happened second in time? What happened third in time? Chronos was the Greek god of time. So chronological means in time order. But in more modern writing, 20th century writing, pretty much, storytellers begin experimenting a little bit with the narrative structure of stories, the way time is used in stories. And very often in more modern stories, we have a story that doesn't go in chronological order, doesn't go in time order. So we might have, for example, a story that begins in the present with a person who's old and then is telling the story of something that happened to her when she was young, right? So we start off in the present of the story and then we go back in time. This is sometimes referred to as a flashback, going back in time. If you've ever seen the movie Titanic, you know that at the beginning, the main character is an old woman, and she's telling the story of what happened to her as a young woman when the ship sank. So the story starts with her in the present as an old woman, then it goes back in time to when she's young, right? And then at the end of the movie, comes back to the present when she's an old woman. So obviously the events of that movie, the sequence of that movie the events are not in chronological order, because we start in the present, we go backward in time, and then come back to the present. Okay, so what we know about sequence in stories, or just in anything that's written, primarily through signal words. Signal words are like words like first, second, third, first, then, after, before, words that show points in time. Okay, so we're going to take a look at two passages. The first one is pretty much written in chronological order, what happens first in time, what happens second in time. The second passage has a bit of playing around with the sequence a bit. So here's the first passage. We're thinking about what order things happen in. Butter is made from the fat in cream. When cream is shaken, the fat comes together. It forms bits of butter. After the bits have formed, a liquid is left. This is called buttermilk. The buttermilk is drained off. Next, the butter bits are washed with cold water. Then they are drained and salted. In the final stage, the butter is mixed well. Okay? So we see some signal words in here, don't we? In the second line, we see after. In the fourth line, we see next. In the fifth line, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, we see then. And then in the 6th line it says in the final stage. Those are all signal words that the writer uses to help us confirm what order events happen in. All right, let's look at question number 1. What's the first step in making butter? So we have to look back at the passage, and we see that the first thing that happens is letter C. First, when the cream is shaken, the fat comes together. If we were to put these 4 answers in sequence order, here, C would be 1, A would be 2, B would be 3, and D would be 4. So very often on the GED and the HiSET, you're given some answers like this and asked to put them in the order that they happened in the story. That's a common sequence question on a reading comprehension test. Number 2, what happens right after the butter bits are formed? So if we look back up here, it forms line 2, it forms bits of butter. After the bits have formed, a liquid is left. This is called buttermilk. The buttermilk is drained off. So G, the buttermilk is poured off right after the butter bits. After that, they're washed, and the last thing happens is they're mixed well. J here comes before the butter bits are formed. So, and the question says, what happens right after the butter bits are formed? 3, which word is not used to signal when a step happens? Which of these words is not a signal word? It's not a word that gives us a signal or an indication of time. So after, that's a time word. Next is a time word. Because is not a time word. Then is a time word. So the answer here, the one word here that is not a signal word, signaling a step happening, is the word because. And 4, what is the last step in making butter? So we look up here. If we look, shaking comes first, draining comes next, salting comes after that, and the last thing that happens is F, mixing. Okay? All right, we're going to sign out here, come back on a video, look at the other passage. All right.